group. I mean, there's no such thing as a black hole, because that's based on the idea that there's a curved space-time, and there's no evidence for that. Meaning, okay, the only difference between science and religion is that religious people like animated hidden mechanisms, and theoretical scientists prefer inanimate ones. So they both created their version of it. One's called space-time, and the other one's called God, or being, or whatever. And so it's like the whole argument of theism versus atheism has been disposed. And so it's like collectivism versus individualism. We're not meant to agree. It's part of our differences in our personality that are creating these different worldviews, but they're all metaphorical. There's no hidden mechanisms because that wouldn't do any good. Existence would still be undecidable. You invented a god. It's not the infinite regress problem that's a problem, where you have to invent another god that exists and another god that exists. It's that existence still wouldn't be decidable. It's like it doesn't do anything. It just creates another thing to explain. Because existence is what the problem is. Oh, and back to there has to be existence and non-existence, because you can't leave out one of the possibilities. That's why it's like that. You can't. The question is not why existence rather than non-existence. It's why existence rather than non-existence now as opposed to before. You see what I mean? It's not leaving a possibility out, and that has to be symmetrically asymmetrical with absence and presence. That's why everything's like how it is. This is a little more complicated. This is a little more complicated. I'll leave that out. Let's see. What else could we talk about here? Well, there's a morality that has to do with the fact that all of our personalities can't be excluded. I mean, it's basically individualism versus collectivism, and the collectivists actually are more right hemispheric in some ways, not in all ways. There's different functions. I can show you those to you in a later podcast, but the diagram part, which won't make any sense, is right here. You see all these are actually parts of our personality. They all have this less of more of less thing. Has to do with left hemisphere and right hemisphere. Also has to do with bottom and top, because the top is more less of more, and all the more automated features are in the lower part of the brain and the lower part of the body too. So more of less is, for our purposes right now, it just sort of means like more of the same, more automated. Okay. These are states of the mind. Like this is, you can see vision, like curved surface, composite surface. And then there we can see kind of like the structures of things in culture, like the parts of a house and parts of a car, parts of a TV, parts of a song, parts of a movie, parts of a conversation. I don't want to really get into much of these. It's really detailed, but then the other parts of the mind, like we actually even game, inning, and a bat, things like that. Anything that's part of culture, it's built into our mind already. Not the actual examples of it, but like the fact that it comes in threes like that. Alright, I don't want to get into this too much, but we can see like preposition, identifier, type, noun, noun phrase, verb phrase, and then that's rather than others. There's different types of sentences, like noun phrase, verb phrase, rather than not, or noun phrase, verb phrase, because. Then there's other ones. I forgot what they are. All our actions can be built into this. Sorry. Not even paying attention here. Don't want to get into that. That this podcast is sort of for people that've kind of given up on everything. Uh, there's a morality that goes with this that you have to make. Basically, we live in a left hemispheric society, and anything that's part of the right hemispheric reality gets marginalized, even though that's where all evaluation occurs. But once things have been evaluated, get into the left hemispheric, once it automates it, then it just becomes different variations of these automated rules that get normalized. And utility, it's really hard to change anything once it becomes automated in our minds. And then there's a familiarized authority, source of symbolic power that we all believe in for different things. And it's really hard for a lot of people to listen to anything new like this because they've already got their authority on like the nature of things. So this will conflict with that, especially the stuff I said about science and religion. And oh yeah, so I was talking about hidden mechanisms, like how science has an inanimate hidden mechanism and religion uses animated hidden mechanisms, and space-time is the version that science uses. It's basically in the image of a solid, fluid, or liquid. So they're basically using a solid, fluid, and a liquid, a hidden version of it, and they're trying to explain things, the shape of something that's a solid, fluid, and a liquid. It's trying to eliminate absence between presence. Of course, that's never possible because if you imagine anything that you fill the gap between planets with, all you've done is created a smaller gap because you can't have anything without a gap. Once you eliminate the gap, it's purely continuous, then you don't have anything at all. That's why there has to be absence and presence, and that's symmetrically asymmetrical with existence and non-existence, how the concepts are used. I don't know how much more I want to do now. I'm just kind of rambling here. So, the fact that there's a false worldview and a true worldview, it has to do with... It's not that the false worldview is excluded. It's actually not even a worldview. It's just the world. It's actually purely incidental, the way they have it constructed. I call it the undecidability of the how of absolute relativity. That's the false world with a hidden mechanism. And then the true one is irreducible multiplicity of the Tao of eternal novelty. And this is all what it sort of means. You don't need to understand that. All you need to really, for now, you just have to understand that this is that first three. These, which I haven't really explained, it really means exclusion, non-exclusion, exclusion, non-exclusion. Then it uses it in the reverse order, non-exclusion, then exclusion. And then the how of absolute relativity uses it in the opposite way. And these concepts are symmetrically asymmetrical. It's three symmetrical asymmetries. And that's why there even is it's so the false worldview is not being excluded by criteria, it's incidentally excluded. It's not... I hope that makes sense. I mean, it's included. Like, the concepts are there, it's just this doesn't turn into existence because it's undecidable. Because it doesn't acknowledge pre-existential explanations. Everything's contained within existence. Same with religion. It's all part of this. And so this is incidentally excluded, not intentionally excluded. And this is what turns into existence. Or technically, there's never been a beginning to eternal novelty. That's why it's eternal. Now, what it really means is it's eternally non-eternal. It keeps on repeating itself. But it never began. That whole process never began. It's always happened, and it's always going to happen. If it did initiate, see, there'd be a problem, because it turns out that you can't explain all the asymmetries, all the degrees, like all the masses. You can explain the I can explain the categories, but all the degrees within the categories and the constants, you can't fully explain all those because they're a matter of degrees. You have no rationale for why they're this way rather than just a light nudge this way. You see what I mean? And so the problem that you have is you can never get out of it being undecidable unless eternal novelty never has a beginning, meaning it's eternal. Because then you can defer the question indefinitely, meaning like the constants are the same as before, or the same as before, or the same as before, but it never has a starting point where you have to explain it. And that's how that gets around the undecidability problem, is the fact that it's eternal, or eternally non-eternal. So this is like a jigsaw puzzle. Like I said, like all these G's and S's, all the orders of them have to cancel. And all these 3's and 2's and 2's and 3's have to cancel. And the 3 2 2 3 cancels with a 2 3 3 2 down there, which is crazy. I mean, it took me 15 years to figure this all out. And time before that. So I think that's all I want to do for now. Time to go to bed. I don't know what I want to talk about. So much I could talk about. Yeah, the only way to construct sort of like a new economic system would have to take into account the fact that we can't keep on trying to fit square pegs into round holes, meaning we can't keep on trying to make the right hemisphere turn into the left hemisphere. I mean, there has to be room made for it, meaning everything can't be about money or symbolic power or other. There has to be something else. The collectivists, the hyper-individualists, that all they care about is money or other forms of power or symbolic power, they've hoarded it to the point where it's basically a money supply problem, to the point where where people can't actually sustain themselves, like where everyday life is just a grind, because a few people have to have so much that some people can't even persist, and there's this mentality that it's their own choice, or it's because they're lazy. But if you really look at these terms, they're not real. What lazy really means is you don't understand the reasons, this different sensory and emotional, and basically you're not seeing the entirety of the situation, because all success is advantage, meaning your personality's different, your body's different, the way you use your body's different. There's thousands and thousands of little differences. It's just that we can't see them, and it's a huge problem. It's like the ultimate form of discrimination is to discriminate against someone's personality. And if you're right, if you have more right hemispheric features that you are, how's the word, more disposed towards, you don't make it very far in life, because you think that everyone's nice, and you probably get taken advantage of because you're more empathetic. You don't understand that there's this push for power because you've just watched TV your whole life, and you didn't have the internet, maybe. Like you're just watching all the people in these movies and they seem like you, but then you go out in the world and people aren't noble like that. They're not. It's really hard to explain. People understand what I'm saying, but they can't put their finger on what it even is. Some people it doesn't affect at all because they're actually like most people. They just kind of are out for themselves. They think like an individualist. They think that it's just other people's fault that they fail. The individualist really doesn't see that somebody has to fail. and that free will is an illusion, because that would be undecidable. That's my whole point, is that all success is advantage because all behavior is explained. I mean, there's always a reason why you did this rather than that. It could be the most minute reason, like you're choosing a candy bar and you look beneath for the fresher ones or something with the better dates because you care about that. But you might not have enough time, so you pick the one on top. See, there's exceptions to exceptions to exceptions. People always try to give me these counter arguments. Like I say, you ate because you were hungry. And they go, well, I didn't. I don't always eat when I'm hungry. Ha ha ha. And I go, that's because if you looked at your actual mental states, you'd see that there's other reasons. I mean, you might be at work and you're hungry, but you can't eat at that point. It's hard to have conversations because people will do stuff like that, and you're like, how could you not even think about that? The counter argument to you is like so obvious. The idea of undecidable action is you can't even give an argument for it because that betrays the whole idea. If you want to give a reason for something, then why are you even giving a reason if you don't believe that your beliefs need reasons? If you believe that your beliefs are free of reasons, then you want to give reasons for your beliefs? You want to give reasons for your actions? Why do you give reasons for your actions if those aren't, in some sense, related to the explanation for your actions? I just went off on a tangent. I think I'm just going to end there. Alright. Good night. I hope you check out the website. I'm going to keep on making these because I have nothing better to do. Because everything's fake. Alright. See that? Make that a brand. Look at that. Nobody thinks that's cool. That's weird. You're all weird.